hire purchase is allowed in Islam. My question is, the what is then difference between mortgage, which is you got like Islamic mortgage, or mortgage which is normal mortgage, and which one is allowed or which one is not allowed, and what's the big difference between two?
There are Muslims who were not comfortable with the idea of the conventional mortgage. They have their opinions which are based on their respective fiqh, jurisprudence, wherein they feel that once you be a part of the mortgage process, you cannot be immediately its owner. There is a principle some Muslims have accepted as binding, which says that you cannot have two deals done in one arrangement, in one contract. Where has that understanding come from? Well, it's based on their interpretation of a few ahadith. The fact of the matter is that if we look at those incidents had some peculiar complexities, in our opinion, which obviously can always be disputed, which caused people to decide that two arrangements, two contracts cannot be put together in one. That was one issue. The other issue is that in case of a conventional mortgage, when the lessee decides that he would not like to continue with the arrangement anymore, the asset is sold out, and the price that is fetched is then utilized for the purpose of paying back the outstanding amount that the lessee had to pay. In most of the cases, the asset that fetches the amount is sold at a much higher value, because in most cases these houses, their prices go up. And obviously when that is what happens, then there is no problem. The lessee is in an advantage. However, there is a theoretical possibility, and that theoretical possibility sometimes does happen, although very rarely, that the economic situation is such that in the market, the asset that is there for it to be sold, it fetches a price which is less than what the lessee owes to the bank or mortgage society. So in that case, obviously, the lessee is, or the mortgagee is, in a disadvantage. What people call Islamic mortgage, they take care of it. They say that once a person is on the verge of default, they would make sure that the person is not called upon to pay anything more than the principal amount that is due on him. Our understanding is that this difference is there, but it is practically, in most cases, non-existent. It is a theoretical possibility, which if the Islamic mortgage, the way it's called, have taken care of it, it's good. It's something which should be welcomed. But simply because of this one particular minor difference, we cannot declare the other form of hire purchase arrangement, which is normally described as mortgage, to be un-Islamic. Many people are hesitant to go for mortgage because the amount that they pay is over and above the value of the asset, is called interest. by the banks and mortgage societies as well. I think it's a misuse, it's an incorrect use of the expression. What is paid should actually be described as rentals. I keep telling people that if you start calling a sheep pig, sheep would not become pig. It's the reality of sheep and the reality of pig which distinguish the two from each other. Likewise, the reality of the payments that one makes to the banks or mortgage societies after acquiring a house or an asset which doesn't get exhausted as a consequence of it being used, that payment is not interest. It's a payment of giving rentals and principal. As I said in the beginning, obviously this is something for each individual to think about and decide. One of the things that the Quran keeps telling us is that be absolutely sure that you do not say about God and His religion what you don't know. So, there is one point of view that we are presenting. There is another point of view which some other people are presenting. There is no reason why we should accuse each other of misleading people. Let's try to understand the two arguments, and whatever people feel more comfortable with is what they should go for.
So, Dr. Sir, just a point of clarification for me. I mean, there was a technical discussion involved there as well. But for practical purposes, and if I, let's say, choose to go for a mortgage tomorrow and I want to buy a house, should I go to an Islamic bank because it is more Islamic, or should I go to a conventional bank even though it offers me like a better rate because it uses the term interest with its loan, and interest is quite a feared word. So what should I do then?
You see, that's exactly what I'm trying to clarify. People who say that their way of dealing with the questions of mortgage is Islamic, they have used this expression because they feel that what they're doing is right, and what the other arrangement is offering is unacceptable to Islam. I have made an attempt to briefly distinguish between the two. If you will ask me, I will say that even if the conventional mortgage is okay if you want to go for it, the two have some differences, but they are not critical, they are not decisive. It really is not a case wherein you are going for either halal meat or a haram meat. Both are okay, although if a Muslim is to run a mortgage society or deal with the business of mortgage, he or she should make sure that even in case where a lessee or mortgagee is likely to be in difficulty, well, that difficulty should not be caused for that person. So in my opinion, the two are equally okay. But obviously it's a question wherein people should look at their comfort level. When I say comfort level, well, their own conscience should be at peace and it should be satisfied.
My name is Shahid. I live in Cambridge as well. The spirit of riba jahiliya, which was not only double interest but quadruple. So the spirit, and what is wrong about that? What was wrong about that is the exploitation. And this we have seen in the last century of Hindu Banya, who would give you a lot of loan, and then the whole family would suffer. Generation, they are not going to pay because the interest was so high. But modern economic system, there is a concept of inflation, which actually was not there because it used to be barter trade. So concept of inflation and deflation was not there. And the mortgage, actually, do you really think, I think generally concept is that it is very exploitable because riba was haram because of exploitation. Riba jahiliya was 4 times more you have to pay. Now, when you get a mortgage, actually, I don't think they are exploiting you, actually, they are facilitating you. The reason is because you get, first of all, you can't own a house if you are not a businessman. So you are working, you have to actually accumulate so much amount of money, maybe 300,000 pounds, and to buy average house, they give you. And not only you are, and by the time you accumulate that 300,000 pounds, I think your life is finished, or you will be paying rent all the time. So by giving you mortgage, they are not exploiting you, they are actually facilitating you, in my opinion. Also, the increase in the value of house. So if you pay a mortgage for 10 years and you sell your house, actually you are you have not actually mentioned about these things. Although you mentioned you are completely different than the traditional concept of interest, but you have not mentioned the value of money and the interest rate.
Right. I just have to tell my Facebook viewers that I am not having tea with my left hand. It's just a mirror. Quite often they're very particular about it. It's my right hand. This is my left hand. You know. You see, there are two things that I would want to talk about in response to your question. The first thing is that, as I clarified in my initial presentation, that Sharia gives its verdict in matters which are unclear and confusing. And because they are unclear, the Almighty gives His final verdict that this is wrong. Exploitative interest, very high rates, exorbitant rates are unacceptable anyways. It's morally reprehensible. The question that the Almighty has dealt with most clearly and emphatically is that what if a person whom you have given a certain value and he is, because of factors not within his control, he is not in a position to pay back your value to you, and you insist that I not only pay to you the value that you had lent me, but I should also pay you an additional increment, howsoever small that increment, the Almighty says, I don't allow it. That is what Sharia is, right? The other thing is, notice I didn't say amount, I said value. And that in itself answers your question. If you gave me 100,000 pounds in the year 2000 and I returned 100,000 pounds to you in 2018, it would be unfair. The Almighty says, La tazlimuna wa la tuzlamun. Neither be unfair nor allow others to be unfair to you. So this erosion in value of money has to be compensated by the borrower if justice is to be done. Obviously, if the borrower is not in a position and you forego it, that's a separate matter. But the fair deal is that the purchasing power that I borrowed from you, I must give you back the same purchasing power. This is what you also gather from a hadith as well. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that when you give gold, take back the same. The moment you tell me, and I can find out from your books of accounts as well, and I've appointed an auditor as well, that you're not making profits, you are running into losses, or you're making fewer profits. About eliminating riba, the alternative that they talk about is profit and loss sharing. Profit and loss sharing is one possibility. There could be many other possibilities. So, riba is to force a borrower under all circumstances to pay an amount which is more than the value that was lent, even if the person is not in a position to pay. And when you write an agreement of riba-based agreement, that is exactly what it mentions. The moment you mention that it is conditional upon the fact that you will be in a position to pay back, then it's okay, kosher, in my understanding. People can always disagree.
There's a question from Islam. Yeah, go ahead.
Just coming back to mortgage,
Right.
just one fine point. Sometimes we have heard the opinion that the mortgage in the house you're living in is, to use the word halal, so it is all right. but the mortgage for anything else, for example, another property or a family member living in, or for example, for business, is not okay. So if you're going to do interest, it has to be essential that there's no option other than to take the mortgage in the house. So I guess my question is, if we are looking at the mortgage that we are taking here as simply a part rental and a part giving back the amount, would that also apply to, for example, any other such arrangement, or would that only apply to the one that you're living in? Simply because this distinction seems to have been made quite frequently.
Again, I would request you that as much as is possible, whenever you get an opinion, don't just get an opinion, get the reason for that opinion, the arguments for it. Because, as I said earlier, we must learn our religion. We will disagree, because none of us is perfect. None of us can claim that he or she is receiving divine revelation directly. We are just trying to understand honestly, humbly, what the Almighty's law is. The opinion that you've mentioned is based on an understanding that although mortgage is not allowed, yet for purposes which are absolutely necessary, like to own a house, it is reluctantly allowed. What I'm saying is that it is not reluctantly allowed. It's something which is an acceptable form of owning, wherein assets that you need are provided to you and they are in your possession right from day one. You are making use of them and you are giving rentals on the use of those assets. And while you are using them, you are giving rent as well as a part towards the principal value of it. I think it's brilliant. It is making life easier for people. People who otherwise couldn't have afforded cars, houses, shops, they are able to own them. Now, if you think that it's not making sense, perfectly fine. Nobody can force an opinion upon the other person. But do try to understand what argument is being put across, and on what basis. And obviously, this would help in knowing what exactly our religion is saying and what are the problems that we would want to always avoid.
Yeah, go ahead.
Totally separate to mortgage and riba and all that.
Alhamdulillah. So relieved.
You touched on inheritance as well.
Yeah.
And you said the closer the person is, the more they're entitled to. But I think from an inheritance point of view...
Sorry, was that zakat or
Zakat.
inheritance?
Sorry.
Zakat.
But my question still comes to inheritance. Thanks for the correction. Okay, on the death of a husband,
There is
No,
something to...
gets 1/8. And you said that they are entitled, the parents have their rights, the siblings have their rights, the children have their rights, the male gets twice as much as the woman and all that. Why is it just 1/8 for the wife who spent her life supporting that husband through thick and thin, and then when the time comes, she's left with 1/8? And I understand, okay, maybe it's the duty of the son to support the mother or the siblings or the parents or whatever. But in this day and age, things are not as such, a lot of families are far away, the sons cannot support the mothers, life is expensive, so those sort of things come in. So my question is, I know I have to accept it, but I don't understand why such a small percentage for the wife on the death of the husband.
I like the spirit of the question. We would not obviously say no to what the Almighty is saying, but we would still nonetheless try to understand what the underlying argument and wisdom is. Again, you are right that the law, when it was given, the normal arrangement was that the husband was expected to look after the financial matters, economic responsibilities of the family. That is why he gives this dower, meher, right at the beginning, uh, declaring that the pattern of the family would be such that the wife would is more likely to take care of the affairs of the home, kids, etc., and the husband is going to take care of the uh, matters outside the home, like earning, etc. So, when you look at the uh, benefit, the material benefit, quite clearly, the husband is making arrangements more than the wife. The Almighty has very clearly stated, La tadruna ayyukum aqrabu lakum nafa. You don't know who amongst you is closer to you in manfaat, benefit. It does include obviously the house chores that you do, and the kind of effort that you put in to look after the house, but it also includes the funds, the revenues that are generated through work by the husband. So that's the formula. It does not in any case include the possibility that the lady is going to be held by a brother or her father, etc. That has not been mentioned in the Quran. The only reason mentioned is the possibility of getting benefit from the different relatives. That's at the heart of the entire uh, the entire uh, formula of distribution. Now we come to the modern times when ladies also work. Well, they do at their own volition. It's what they want to do. But you might say that the circumstances are such that you cannot make a living, or you cannot have a good quality life unless the wives also work. Uh, I think in that case there are two solutions. One solution which I have not as yet been able to feel comfortable with, although it has a very strong point to make. I'll tell you that one first. The understanding is, and that this understanding is given by my teacher, mentor, Javed Ahmad Ghamdi Sahab. He says that a person before dying can leave in his will the fact that quite apart from what an individual or relative will get, what is mentioned in his or her favor in the law of inheritance, he is also requiring an additional part to be given to the same person, not because of that relationship, but because of either that person had served him more than others, or the person is in need. So what he says, I'm still not completely comfortable, but I'm giving an opinion of an important scholar. What he says is that, for instance, if he has 4 children, a daughter and 3 sons, he's gotten 3 of them married, and one of them is still studying. So what he says is that if I write it in my will, that as far as them being my children, that relationship is concerned, they'll all get according to what the law of inheritance says. But the Almighty also allows me to will in favor of one of these kids, or a few of them, who served me more, or who are in need more than others, and I'll write it down that it's because of this reason. But as I said, I'm still a little short of feeling completely comfortable with this understanding. So what I say is that a good husband who feels that his wife is also working and has worked for a good part of their married life and has contributed considerably, realizing that the share that is normally ordinarily available for wives would not do justice with what she has done. He should give her a part of his wealth during his lifetime. He should say that this part of it belongs to her. maybe share a part of his assets, or his house or whatever. I feel that justice should be done for circumstances, for situations which are not uh, ordinarily the case, which is not what is the normal pattern, through measures which are available.
I have a question. Firstly, my name is Salim Beg, I'm living in Cambridge as well. So my question is on zakat and income tax, and especially for the people who are living in abroad. So the salary people, they give income tax on their monthly income. Are we still obliged to pay zakat?
You see, let me first talk about a Muslim country like Pakistan. The Quran tells us that, as I said earlier, that it is the Muslim ruler who should get zakat and should spend it on the different avenues that those funds need to be spent on. That's their right, that's their duty. And moreover, ordinarily, they have no right to get anything more over and above than zakat. So the Quran says, for instance, in one of the verses in Surah Tawbah, that when they say their prayers and when they pay zakat, فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُمْ, leave them alone. Don't put any extra burden on them. They have done their job. However, our rulers don't do that now. Instead, what they are doing is that they levy taxes, they charge us, they ask us to pay taxes. Now, there are a number of possibilities. One possibility which is happening in Pakistan is that there are many God-fearing, pious Muslims who without realizing that even if their argument is correct, telling a lie is a big crime. And in order for you to evade taxes, you've got to make a statement which is a lie. You are cheating the system, which you're not allowed to do. So that is what we are saying, that pay your taxes to the government, to the state properly, and calculate your zakat honestly. And if your zakat is more than the taxes that you've paid, you pay the residual, the difference. But if you've already paid zakat more than taxes more than your zakat, then like in alcohol and in matters which are not desirable from an Islamic perspective. So what I think is that if somebody agrees with this basic principle, then he should not allocate understand what the spirit of the Almighty's expectations are, and do what you think is making more sense in the present times.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. My point is here, income tax and zakat. The income tax is taken from your gross salary and it's gone. You're not getting that in your account or in your possession. The amount you are given after tax is your amount, not before tax. And zakat is only if you are making some saving from that amount, nothing to do with your gross salary or payment or income. After you have paid the income tax, the amount you owe is only the post-income tax amount. And after that, zakat will be only payable on that amount if you're making some saving. And that saving is for 12 months or so. So, I think there is no confusion between zakat and income tax. Income tax, where you live, you have to follow and obey the law of the country you live in. You cannot confuse or intermingle the zakat and income tax. Income tax is cut by the government. You get the whatever you get every month or whatever in business or whatever. That's your amount. And in that amount, if you spend all, you don't have to pay zakat. If you make some saving from that amount, you pay zakat on that. So I don't think you're paying income tax and zakat, it will make you poor. I don't think so, in my opinion.
Right. I think This understanding that you've mentioned is going to be applicable if you hold an opinion that zakat is only on savings. Uh, what I said was that zakat is on production, all forms of production. It's on agricultural produce, it's on industrial produce, it's on business, and it's on services that you render. I, as a teacher, I render services. I produce a service and I get returns for it. So, because it's only my effort that is generating that revenue, I have to pay ushr 10%. On the analogy of what was paid in those times in the agricultural produce. However, if you don't hold that opinion, and obviously if you honestly believe that this analogy is not correct, then what you're saying is right. Then obviously there is no serious problem. However, if no matter what I produce, whether it is services or whether it is in the some industrial project that I have come up with, and there is production which is subject to a 5% or 10% levy, then obviously it's going to be a huge amount. So it depends, on what kind of understanding you hold. I feel at the moment convinced that no matter what salary one gets is actually a consequence of the service that you are rendering, and you are being rewarded for it, which to me is subject to a 10% levy.
Question, when it comes to the question of produce, what about the expenses? Like if you are doing agriculture, you put the seed, you put the fertilizers and everything. Do you give ushr before deducting all those expenses on the total produce, or what is your share after paying what you invested?
Honestly, there again, the individual will, for the time being, have to do some kind of ijtihad. During the time when ushr was deducted, the expenses of input were negligible. I mean, they hardly costed anything. There weren't any fertilizer, there weren't any tractors, nothing. Seeds carried very little value. But now you're right, in order for somebody to produce something, the kind of inputs that are invested, they do carry value. Some costs, it seems, should be allowed to be deducted. Others, it seems, should not be deducted. If there was a proper arrangement made by a Muslim state to deduct zakat, they would give a law. But right now, because there isn't any such arrangement in any of the Muslim countries, I think the individual will have to come up with his own understanding as to which part of the costs are to be deducted and which should not be deducted. You might say that you will be lenient to yourself and try to deduct more. But the fact of the matter is that we will be careful. In order for us to decide as to what is the amount that we need to give in the way of God, which is binding on us, some part of it is obviously important to be deducted, because if you deduct nothing, then sometimes it will happen that if you give zakat, your business would go bust. It would just be in a loss.
The one question related to zakat is, if you own a house which you have given on a rent, the zakat is on the value of the house or the monthly rent you get out of the house?
While calculating zakat, you have to first put things in their respective categories. The categories are savings, production, livestock. So while taking decisions, first you've got to decide which category you're talking about. When you have a house other than the one that you're living in, and you just kept it there for its value to go up, and then to avail capital gains from it, you are actually saving. But when you give your house to somebody to live therein, and you're getting rentals, it is actually producing a service. So it would be subject to 10% zakat on the rentals that you get, and not on the value of that house.
So you don't need to pay anything for the value till you
It has
sell
to be one of the two categories. You see, your field where you are raising crops, the value of that land is not subject to zakat. It's the crops that you raise, production. So it has to be one category or the other.
And there is a question from Mr.
Yeah. अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
Right.
मेरा क्वेश्चन जो है वो ज़कात के बारे में है। तो जैसा कि आपने कहा वो में तो जो तुम्हें दिया गया है उसमें से खर्च करो बेसिकली। तो आई थिंक कि ये क्वेश्चन हर क्वेश्चन को जो है वो आंसर कर देता है ज़कात के बारे में, क्योंकि एक तरफ अल्लाह ये कहते हैं कि तंगदस्त हालत में हो या खुशहाल हालत में हो तुमको ज़कात देनी है, और जहाँ जहाँ सलात के बारे में बात आई है उसी के साथ जो है वो ज़कात के बारे में भी बात आई। तो दैट इज़ लाइक रियली बेसिक थिंग अ मुस्लिम हैव टू डू, प्रेयर के साथ ज़कात। तो रसूल के ज़माने में भी जब कुरान रिवील हुआ तो उनकी कौम ने बहुत सारे मुझसे सवालात किए, बहुत सारी बातों में, हर चीज़ के बारे में, लेकिन ज़कात के बारे में कोई ख़ास क्वेश्चन आया नहीं कि किस तरह हमको ज़कात जो है क्या करें, खर्च कैसे करें। तो तब की मतलब जब से ये दीन है तब से ये चीज़ भी है ज़कात देना, और हर कोई को ये पता है कि किस तरह करना। तो आज के ज़माने में इतना कॉम्प्लेक्स क्यों बना दिया गया है, इतनी बाउंड्रीज ही आपको ज़कात देनी पड़ेगी, और हर चीज़ का एक
हैं अल्लाह के रास्ते में, वो सब सदका है, वो सब इन्फाक है, वो सब खैरात है। इसमें एक कैटेगरी वो है, एक हिस्सा वो है जो लाजिम है। जैसे आप नमाज़ पढ़ते हैं ना, तो हम अल्लाह को याद करते हैं, अल्लाह को जितना भी आप याद करें कम है, लेकिन अल्लाह शुक्र है उन्होंने ये नहीं कहा कि भेड़ से मिलती जुलती है, कह देते तो क्या किया जा सकता था, लेकिन ये करना एक मजबूरी थी। इसलिए कि मैं आपके सवाल का जवाब दे रहा हूँ, हालात जब बदल जाते हैं तो कोई जवाब न देना भी एक जवाब है, आप में इस पर अप्लाई नहीं होता। अभी जो एक सवाल से मालूम हुआ और जो हमारे यहाँ एक प्रिडोमिनेंट अंडरस्टैंडिंग है कि भाई ज़कात तो सेविंग पे होती है, तो ये जो बड़ी बड़ी चीज़ लेते हैं अंडरस्टैंडिंग ये इस पर कोई ज़कात नहीं है, इसलिए कि उसमें फिर ये एक खामोश इज्तिहाद कर लिया गया कि वो जो खेत पर में प्रोड्यूस होती थी ना फसल, उसको आगे बढ़ाया नहीं जा सकता, वो बस वही है। हम एक हम्बल एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग पेश कर रहे हैं कि नहीं, जो खेत पे फसल उगती थी जिसमें 5% और 10% अप्लाई होता था रेट, ये सिर्फ खेत नहीं था, कहीं किसी को आना बड़ा पेचीदा मसला है, इसमें तो आपको बहुत से प्रोजेक्ट्स जो हैं वो अंडरटेक करने पड़ते हैं, इसके लिए अलग से टैक्स लगेंगे। हम ये गुजारिश करते हैं कि खुदा ताला ने मुसलमान हुक्मरानों को ज़कात के अलावा किसी और चीज़ को लेने से रोक दिया है। आप अगर लेंगे तो फिर आप उनकी मर्ज़ी से, आज़ादाना मर्ज़ी से लेंगे। जैसे आप वो कह रहे हैं ना कि डैम के लिए पैसे तो आप अपनी मर्ज़ी से दे रहे हैं, लेकिन आप
एक लास्ट क्वेश्चन अगर ले लें, बिकॉज़ खाना भी रेडी है एंड आई एम श्योर एवरीबॉडी इज टायर्ड एज वेल, लेकिन व्हाट वी कैन डू इज ड्यूरिंग एज वेल, बेशक आप लोग अपने क्वेश्चंस पूछते रहें, इफ डॉक्टर ज़हीर डजंट माइंड, ये लोग अपने क्वेश्चंस आप तक लाते रहेंगे।
So long as there is food available, why should I?
So is that okay?
जी।
Can we have one last question, please?
Just after listening to the card topic, what comes in my mind at the moment is you are saying zakat is on the annual income, not on the saving, because at the moment I think most of us
that will be applied on it. Once that is applied and you deduct zakat from there, if you accept this understanding, then the salary that would remain with you, some part of it you will spend, some part of it you will save, and come 1st Ramadan, 1st July, or whatever day you have decided to calculate the value of your assets for the purpose of deducting zakat from it, this amount which still remains and the other assets that are not being used, you will calculate their value and deduct 2.5% from it. So the salary will be subject to a deduction because it's a production process that has caused you to get it at the time of payment to you, which is normally deduction at source. And then later on, when some part of it would become a part of your savings, then that would be subject to a 2.5% zakat levied on it in a separate category. And if you purchase quite a few animals, then they will be a third category. So it all depends.
I don't think that should not apply in this country because we pay about 40% taxes on that.
I think this concept, what you have given about services as a versus production at Ushur as well. I think if this is true, I don't know, if this is true, then I'm sure we are all sinful not paying the zakat properly.
Inadvertently, you are paying more than what you should pay. But you see, that's what I'm saying, that you should understand it first. In your process of understanding, you can agree or you can disagree. If you agree on the basis of religious arguments, then you should understand what the Almighty is expecting from you and then proceed to go about doing it practically. So I think if nothing is happening, probably you are paying right now more. But I think what is more important is that we understand what God's expectation is, what His religion says, what the Prophet ﷺ has required us to do, and then decide about what you are doing or you ought to do, and hopefully things are not going to be practically very complicated. It's just a matter of understanding and applying.
Is it allowed to pay zakat to a non-Muslim ruler to spend?
Because there are two questions. One is that is zakat allowed to be paid to a non-Muslim needy person? In that case, the popular answer is no, but my answer is yes. Why? Because there is no solid, clear, convincing religious argument to the contrary. There are two arguments presented normally when people are very emotional, when they say we won't pay zakat to non-Muslims. One argument is that there are people who say that the Prophet ﷺ, when he sent his representatives to Yemen, he asked them to take zakat funds from their rich and spend on their poor. From this statement, there is nothing more in the statement. From this statement, some people infer what it actually means is that you take zakat from the rich of Muslims. Their rich means the rich of Muslims, and pay to their poor, that is the poor of the Muslims. The fact of the matter is that honestly what it means is that you get zakat from the rich of Yemen and pay it to the poor of Yemen. Don't take it to Medina, where when it would be carried, it might actually get spoiled, rotten, destroyed in the way. The other argument which people present to prove that zakat funds cannot be paid to non-Muslims is that they say that Umar radiallahu anhu, when he became Khalifa, he said, I am not going to spend zakat funds on non-Muslims. This statement of Umar radiallahu anhu proves that prior to this statement, prior to him becoming the Khalifa, it was actually being spent during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and during the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu on non-Muslims as well. As an administrator, he could have taken that decision, probably because of the fact that he could see that there are so many poor Muslims that he should first pay to them. The fact of the matter is that There's no Muslim, non-Muslim divide in this matter. Now, coming to the question of a non-Muslim ruler, it again has to be an ijtihad. You either calculate your zakat properly and you pay taxes as well. Well, I have no problem. I will salute you. You're doing a great job. But the fact of the matter is that, you see, these funds were meant for the central administration to collect and then to be spent. In case of non-Muslims, this question would always be disputed. It would always be debated. My answer is that partly yes, partly no. Many would say just not possible. They are not eligible. Some would say, and there are many who think that what we are paying to this system, we are a part of this system, this should be taken as zakat. Again, let's not forget, the basic argument is that the Almighty has mentioned clearly in the Quran, فَإِن تَابُوا وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُمْ. If they repent and they become Muslims, they say their prayers and they pay zakat, leave them. You cannot burden them with anything extra. Because, taxation traditionally is a very strong tool in the hands of the rulers to exploit the subjects. You give them the right, the liberty to levy any percentage of tax, and the people are going to be burdened unnecessarily. So, it was therefore decided that no taxation without representation. But the Almighty has not even allowed this principle to be applicable. He has himself decided as to how much zakat is to be taken from the people. And he has given his law, which covers, as I said, 3 categories.
Thank you very much. So we'll go for dinner and then continue the question answer.
Yeah.